Thank you very much, CESA, for having me today. And it's really an informed conversation that we're having. Very important, very profound in our day and age today. And I'll start from my career. I think Kim has covered quite a lot from undergrad as a woman and her experiences. I experienced the same, and I think a lot of us did. And as you move on into the workplace, the bias that you experience and the gender bias particularly is from my side, being a Black female, is coupled with other biases that we have to navigate through. But for the workplace, I think women are still discriminated against professionally. A lot of that is happening, whether it's directly through compensation or indirectly through the way in which they are treated or the way in which they are spoken to. And I think Kim made a few examples earlier about how they would speak to her about her looks versus her capabilities. And that happens quite a lot. And with me being Black and me working with Black leadership, there is some bias as well that you experience, where you would find that the Black men who are leading in the space would refer to each other by their clan names. So they would refer to each other by Shenge, because I'm Buthelezi, so they'd say Shenge and Zwide to each other. But when they look at me, they give me a nickname. So they would then shorten my name and say, hi, Fifi, you know, that's bias. And I would stand up and say, but why are you not calling me by my clan name? Respect me as you respect your male counterparts. So those are small biases that you see within the same race. So it's not really something that's just racial, as Masinga mentioned earlier. And this bias worsens as you climb the ladder into in the corporate world. The one thing that I find as well that people forget is that women already hold themselves at a high standard. So these biases that are there in the workplace are also putting women through the process of actually evaluating them and wanting them to be competent way above their counterparts, their male counterparts. And as time goes on, it starts decreasing the number of females that you find in the leadership position, because you've already put the woman in a stereotype that for you to be here, you need to be extraordinary. And at the same time, those women are also extraordinary mothers at home. And it starts being a big challenge for women to start choosing, how can I then balance the two? And why should I have to choose one than the other? So the gender bias in the workplace really does go a long way in having less females in the workplace. And yet we've got policies that are encouraging you to have more females in the workplace. So those two things really do not work together. They contradict each other. And for us to all succeed with these regulations and these policies and these KPIs that require us to have an equal amount, a balance gender-based in terms of the workplace, we need to make sure that we train people to eliminate the gender bias so that we can have a lot more females in the workplace. And I'll move on then to the diversity and the unconscious biasness that we're finding as a client, as Rainwater. I think it has been mentioned already by Masinga as well, that diversity, no doubt, embraces the notion of business performance and not necessarily an issue of compliance. And I think it's important for leaders to look at diversity in that manner. It's not a compliance issue because it talks more about relations. We are human beings and we are social. So if you're looking at the ESG aspect of wanting to be a client to a particular public sector, especially in my space as Rainwater, diversity will then be squarely sitting in the social aspect, and that is going to be translated by how your teams are engaging with people like myself in the workplace. We've got a lot of these unconscious biases that shape the perception of capabilities. You find it with for example, the affinity bias, where people that come from a same university would stick together versus those people that come from a different university that they didn't study at. I mean, maybe previously disadvantaged university, like Stephen also mentioned earlier. You're finding it with our professional engineers, where you see that professional engineers would stick together in a workplace, would not give the room and include professional technologists or professional technicians. That is biasness. That is being biased. If you were not aware of that, and that you quickly go towards the people that you seem to feel you share the same qualities with, and you exclude those people that don't share qualities with you, it is biasness. You see it with the notion of engineers working in the private space and then the engineers working in the public space. There is some sort of bias that happens with our engineers in those two spaces. And I think it's very important that our engineers, just as they especially all Black engineers, female engineers, colored engineers, they need to understand, we need to all understand the type of biases that affect our workspace. Because if you are going to have bias towards someone else, and for example, affinity bias towards someone else, you would probably be experiencing some other bias in the next, in your next stage of your career, because these biases are there and there's quite a lot and they differ. We move on to gender bias. I mean, I've touched on my experiences as a female engineer. But when it comes to being a client, I could be invited by a consultant who's obviously looking for business from a rainwater perspective. And because they invite me via email or maybe through my PA, they don't know me, they have not met me. So I would then obviously go with my team to their offices. And as I'm in their office, I'm not recognized, I'm pretty much ignored until the time comes for me to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Refilwe Buthelezi, manager of OT at Rainwater. And you should actually see the change of reception that I get from that. Because now I'm coming with a position of authority, I'm this potential client, you then treat me different. But upon receiving me, you did not give me the same reception. We pick up on those biases, because those are biases. You're probably sitting there thinking, nah, she's Black, probably the technician, or nah, she doesn't look like she could be a manager, or maybe I was not wearing red that day, maybe red symbolizes power, or maybe I'm not tall enough, or maybe I don't look like I could be a manager. But that is you looking at me with your own perceptions and wanting me to fit into your own ideal model of what a manager should be. So those kind of gender biases we experience. And I think there's also a bias, Masinya mentioned, a beauty bias, where you have this concept of how a person should appear, her appearance, her professional stature, whether she is tall. I mean, even men. I mean, you see it even when they are hiring presidents nowadays. You could see in the US, they would say the president is usually tall, has stature, has a position of authority when you just see him, versus when they then hire a short man, and I think they have something they call a short man syndrome nowadays. So those are biases of how a person's appearance is as well, that you now take this person's appearance and you put it and place it in a position and judge their capability of doing their work based on the biases that you have in your mind. And we need to be aware of all of these biases. I mean, there's quite a list, and I think Stephen and Kim have mentioned the list, and I think it's important for all of us to explore these biases and to ask ourselves whether we are also having a role to play with when it comes to these biases, because they really have a far reach in terms of how we do work, how you interact with the clients, and the relationship that you would have with your client. I mean, sometimes if you're a CEO, you might not necessarily be engaging one-to-one with the client, but you do have your teams that are representing you, and how are they trained? What is is their awareness when it comes to these biases? Because they represent you, they represent the culture that you have in your organizations. So when they come to us, the clients, and we pick up on these things, it then starts becoming an issue of service. Are you now providing a good service? Now, remember, you haven't even started doing the work. You haven't even started showing your capabilities. All you've done is interact with me as your potential client. And already I've got a perception based on your treatment, based on the reception that I'm getting. So I think it's really important for us to collaborate as infrastructure companies, for us to work together, for us to improve and change our mindset and our skill set, and have a cross-border where we know that we have diverse teams in terms of how we work as engineers. Kim mentioned how as engineers, we are here to solve problems, and it's really a multidisciplinary space where we have all diverse teams that are there to improve the solutions that we come up with at the end of the day. My background might assist in improving a solution that you might have, because I have a hands-on experience of the area that you're probably working in. I've stayed there, so I might be able to assist in terms of you shaping and co-designing the solution to fit the stakeholder at the end of the day. So I think it's really important for us to evolve our organizations, to ensure that the agility is there and the creativity is there, and most of all, the respect for one another is there. Thank you.